Namaskaram. Good morning and good evening. Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Krutam Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha. Welcome to Global Festival of Oneness. This is our fourth year that we are celebrating the great life and works of Jagadguru Sri Adi Shankara. The whole vision of this festival is to look at Adi Shankara in multiple facets, and today's talk is a indication of that. It is a modern retelling of Shankara Charitham to look at Adi Shankara in a whole new perspective that is relevant to the modern world. So this is the second of a series of 4 talks by Sri Ramesh Venkatraman, and this festival talks happen twice a day, 7 in the morning and 7 in the evening in Indian Standard Time. I have the distinct privilege to introduce our speaker today, Sri Ramesh Venkatraman, who presently works as the director at the Vivekananda Institute for Leadership Development and a faculty at the Vivekananda Institute of Indian Studies. After a 2-decade stint in the corporate world, where he held strategic and leadership positions across the domains of sales and marketing, product management, capacity building, and consulting, Ramesh has now been engaged in the development sector for the last 5 years. Ramesh ji is also deeply invested in understanding, practicing, and disseminating the dharmic and cultural heritage of Bharat. Writing is a passion, and he writes regularly on a range of topics spanning culture, dharma, and management. He is in the process of authoring and publishing 2 books, The Story of Vishnu Sahasranama, essentially Bhishma's Reflections, and Shankara Charitham, a modern retelling, which is what we're going to hear today. So without any further delay, I invite Sri Ramesh Venkatraman to deliver his second of the 4 talk series on Shankara Charitham, a modern retelling.
Thank you and namaskaram. My thanks to Indica as well as my own organization because for giving me the opportunity to be able to speak on this subject. This is not something that, in the interest of continuity, what I intend to do is also quickly summarize what we touched upon in session 1, and then take it forward here. So in session 1, we looked at 3 things, broadly 4 aspects of this. We looked at hagiography, history, and story. That was critical. Then we looked at how the Madhaviya Shankara Vijayam has become the primary source for the life and story of Shankara. And then we also have pointed out how there are multiple sources, and the Shankara Madhaviya. This one is primarily a collation or a compilation of Shankara's life and times from multiple sources, and the Anandagiriyam seems to be one particular manuscript or reference source that seems to be a primary source. Then we looked at what is the process of accepting validity, because it's one of the big problems with modern retelling is that we want to make it, in attempting to make it relevant to current contexts, we seem to forget that there is something that is critical, which is ensuring that we do not cross certain lines that are fundamentally important as far as dharmic retellings are concerned. I think that is something that I've consistently maintained and I've tried to keep. But like I said, in the story also, there are elements where I've introduced aspects, or I have, kind of built on available material to add context, to build on the story itself, and also to add a little bit of more information around it. And in some instances, it could also mean that I would be vicariously thinking and in also trying to live in those times in one sense, in my mind, and then recreate or re-establish certain concepts, contexts, as well as the story. So that is something that I want to do. So we can always come back to this slide deck whenever required. So today what I'm going to be talking about is that one of the big issues that we typically face when we tell stories or when we remember stories. You could take up Ramayana, you can look at Mahabharata, or any of these stories. We often approach these stories in a linear fashion. This happened, then that happened, then this, and so on. But while we actually sit down with the book or with the stories themselves, even when they are reduced to soap operas, or television serials, and all of that, there is a certain kind of linear retelling that happens, and there is a tremendous focus on one or few aspects, or on a few characters, and to the exclusion of all other characters, all other stories. So given that dharma itself is cyclical, circular, and deeply multi-layered, as well as made up of several sections, one of the things that I've tried to do is also approach this by looking at stories within stories, layers within layers, and also if there are connects that can be fleshed out, for the lack of a better word, expanded on, and see how this thing flows. So, for example, to give you an example, when it comes to the episodes dealing with Aryamba, who is Shankara's mother, being very reluctant to allow her only son to get into the sannyasashrama dharma, I have tried to look and present this from Aryamba's point of view, as opposed to presenting it only from the the standard view, where it says that Shankara wanted to become a sannyasi and therefore he became a sannyasi kind of. Two, it is also critical for us to understand what the mother must have undergone in allowing her only son to go into the sannyasashram, because we must remember that his father and Aryamba's husband, Shiva Guru, had only passed away a year ago, and she somehow struggles and gets his Upanayanam done. Once the Upanayana is completed, he spends, by any stretch of imagination, although we do not have clear dates and all of those things, it must have been about a year at the most when he stayed with her. And then here she was, who had, in one sense, if you look at the Madhavya Shankara Vijayam also, they clearly, there is a clear mention there where it says that, the mother had somehow reconciled herself to the loss of her husband, and then she had placed all her hopes on this son. That is quite natural for any mother to do. And then, even after the Upanayana, she actually approaches him and says, there's only one thing that I wish for, and that is for you to get married, and lead the Grahastha Dharma and all of that. Then you have the crocodile Ghat incident, where there is this crocodile who is actually in the traditional storytelling. The crocodile is actually a Gandharva who has been cursed into becoming a crocodile. Therefore, this crocodile plays an important role in ensuring that Shankara's, not just Shankara's desire, but the course of dharma not be impeded in that sense. For example, and therefore, since this is a dharmic course that is going through, and Shankara's life is playing out in the background of dharma, there are multiple issues in which we touched upon in talk one. Dharma itself is undergoing tremendous trouble. It's facing challenges from religions that are in one sense, spin-offs, newer religions like Buddhism and Jainism. And clearly, all of these manuscripts also speak of how people had stopped practicing. The Sandhya Vandana was no longer in fashion. The Nitya Karmas were no longer in fashion. People were questioning the validity and even the need for any of these things. How material living alone had become critical. And in instances such as this, I compare and contrast it with the situation that is playing out in our present times as well. Not very different from Shankara's times. So there is this dharmic conundrum that seems to be, which seems to be playing out all around. And then you have Shankara's life in the middle. A very short life, but in the long arc of time, it's a critical phase that he has entered in. Therefore, Dharma demands that he take up sannyasa ashrama, because clearly in the first episode itself, we established that this is going to be a sannyasa ashrama, sannyasa avatara, as opposed to the typical avatars that have become, that people relate to, speak about Dashavataras or any of those things. That was critical, because there was a need for somebody to come and demonstrate that it was possible to follow the path of Dharma. I think that is the critical purpose of this avatar. That he will not only talk, but walk the talk. And that was the critical need for the Shankara avatar. So this is playing out, and the mother is, even after, he kind of, one could say that the Avatara choreographed the entire crocodile incident also. You can read multiple things into it, but the crocodile incident happened. And Shankara speaks to his mother and says, the moment, if you agree to me taking up sannyasa, it would mean, I can assure you that the crocodile is going to let go of me. And even then, even at that moment, and I this is a nuance that I picked up from the Kanchi Paramacharya's brilliant discourses on the Shankara Charitham. Running into just to put context around this, the English translations of the Madhaviyam, Shankara, and all of that run into roughly about 200, 250, 300 pages. When the Kanchi Paramacharya did not write, he spoke. There were multiple upanyasams, discourses that were given, and they were reduced to writing by R. Gadapati, and volume 5 essentially has most of what he is, almost the entire compendium of whatever he has spoken on Shankara and Shankara's life, and that is called the Shankara Charitham within the Daivatin Kural, or the voice of God. And like I said, it runs into about 700, 750 pages. And there, the Kanchi Paramacharya very subtly points out that even at that moment of dire peril, when it's a decision that, Aryamba has to take between losing the life of her son, or, agreeing to him taking up sannyasa. The words that, in her mind, in her mind, she's thinking of, I don't know how. There is an earlier incident where, the rishis come home and they say that, one of the things that they notice is that this child is going to be a brilliant child, but he's going to be like that meteor that shines bright but goes off, disappears quickly. So she knows that he's not going to be alive for a very long time, that his lifespan is limited. But she still says, at least, but in her mind, it seems, apparently she's thinking that if I say yes, he will at least live. And even if he becomes a sannyasi, I'll at least know that my only son is alive. But the words that come out of her mouth are critical. What she says is, do what you think you want to do. It's like very ambiguous, and she's not very, she still cannot bring herself to utter the words and say, take up sannyasa. So this is here, if you look at the story itself, I build on the sentiments of the mother and kind of show how difficult it must have been for Aryamba to, one, reconcile with the death of her own husband, followed by, in a sense, sannyasa is the death of, is also in a sense kind of one death, because the sannyasi gives up everything that is there, because when Shankara finally takes up the sannyasa ashrama, that's exactly what he says. From now on, all women are my mother, and while you are the mother through which I came into this world, all women I shall see as my mother and mother. So in that sense, it's a death itself. All sannyasis are reborn in that sense. So that is one aspect. So that's what she says. So when Shankara emerges out of the the water, and he's very clear. He's saying that I'm going to be taking up sannyasa. So he's clear that she has agreed, kind of. So she says, "Come home. Let me give you something to eat. Let me feed you first." And once that is done, very interestingly, she says just about one of the things that I'm so happy that you survived, and one of the things that I want to see is to see you getting married. And then Shankara kind of steps back and says, "Have you forgotten what you've said just now?" So that is how fickle and how short-lived human memory is, and how often we struggle with this one. So these are real struggles that many of us face, and this human element is not something that we seem to bring into many of the stories that we want to tell, and that is something that I bring in, and then that is when that is when I embed Shankara's conversation around about how deeply he is invested in getting into sannyasa, how he has, in that very moment, he has severed all relationships with the world and even with her, in that sense. And he speaks of how all women are going to be my mother. And then, Aryamba speaks of, I do not have many sons. One of the traditions that you will find that is very common is that the eldest son typically the reason the eldest son does most of the dahana karyas and all of that is because the eldest son is typically they say that if you have 4 sons, the eldest son is for dharma, the second one and the others will focus on and all of the other things and all of that. So here you have a situation where there's only one son, Shankara, and she says, who will perform my last rites? And that is when Shankara says, that is something that I promise you. No matter where, when, or where it happens, I can assure you that I will be there. And it is here that, for example, if you look at any of the books that are there is no explanation of how, because one of the explanation of how a sannyasi can do the antyeshti for his parents. So this is where in the storytelling, and I introduce, and I also, have a kind of a segue. I make a segue, and actually, I can't say I even explain, but I rationalize the reasons and explain why Shankara actually agreed to do this. And a lot of it is drawn from what the Paramacharya himself speaks of, and also the fact that, and my own understanding of why he did that. For example, if you have only one son, so it is critical for the son to be performing the antyeshtis. And so here was somebody who had taken ashrama, and he was the only son. So that was one particular reason that he agreed. Second, he also wanted to show that, and as an avatara, he was also making it clear, but that there are certain things that are unquestionable when it comes to doing certain things, that you don't have, while virakti is something that is crucial to life, it does not mean that you do a control alt delete and log out of the world. Too often, Shankara is understood as somebody who rejected the world. I do not see it like that at all. When he speaks of getting over Maya and how the world is Maya, this one, Maya is often, spoken of as that which is unreal. But the reality is that it's, for most of us, it is something that is absolutely real. Now I'm speaking, and to me, all that matters is what I'm saying, and all of this seems very real. The online connection that I'm making, or the talk itself that I'm giving, or the book that I'm writing, all of this. So how do you even say? So I do not see Shankara as having spoken of that unreal thing as a false thing. What he's saying is that when the transcendence occurs, when you transcend your current state of existence into and get across the border into a state of existence that is beyond this, then from that perspective, from that angle, all of this seems so ephemeral, so ephemeral, so short-lived, and in one sense so comical that we spend so much time wanting to do this, do that, and all of that, when we know that all of us come with an expiry date. Only thing is, when we take up a package from a mall, we know exactly where the best before, or when it's the product is going to expire. In our case, we do not know, but all of us do have an expiry date. And therefore, the unreality is essentially that you do not realize that in the long arc of time, you are simply a blink, not even a blink, and that therefore there is much more to life than only this physical. That is all that he was referring to. Even as I digress, I'll bring it back to the story itself. So when he takes that ashram, sannyas ashrama dharma, I focus a lot on the why of it, the sentiments of the mother, and also and in terms of the storytelling. The second aspect also is that I spend a lot of time explaining the long walk. There is an entire chapter that I've written on titled "The Long Walk of Destiny." Here was somebody. How did he even know that he had to, go all the way to Omkareshwar? How did he know that he would meet Govinda Bhagavadpada there? What was it? How did he? And all of these things, the reflections, the speculations, thinking behind all of that gets covered in that section. The second aspect is I also spoke of the right at the beginning today. I spoke of how this whole approach of things, of looking at it as linear, is so very different from how we actually understand it. Therefore, it's critical for us to look at stories within stories. And therefore, I spent quite some time, detailing the story of Mandana Mishra and Ubhaya Bharati. One of these, great love stories that exist within the Shankara Digvijayam. Mandana Mishra is also seen as an Amsha Avatara of Brahma, and therefore, and Ubhaya Bharati, of course, is Saraswati's Amsha Avatara. And therefore, both of them are in two separate parts of India. They have not seen each other, but they've heard about each other. And so there is this long distance love that is not where they don't even see each other, but they have fallen in love. And and therefore, what I do is I introduce an element where I say, they meet every night in the dreams, and that is how. And therefore, even the Madhaviya Shankara Vijayam spends quite some time on the Mandana Mishra Ubhaya Bharati love and how they got married and other things. And there is also a very, very interesting element which within that story itself of Mandana Mishra and Ubhaya Bharati, where the socio-cultural and the socio-cultural norms and the socio-cultural practices are brought out in very, very clear terms. And therefore, you get to understand the nature of the times as well. For example, there are two conversations that happen. Now, what happens is that I can read from the chapter also, or I can narrate it as well. I'll narrate it and then probably read also from the chapter. Here is Mandana Mishra, who has become the most, who has become a Pandit accepted across the country, and somebody who's seen as an expert, who suddenly loses all interest in life, stops eating, and he's all the time, he's distracted, and all of that is distracted, not thinking straight, and all of that. And that is when his father asks him, why, what has happened to him, and why is he in this state? And that is when Mandana Mishra confesses to his long distance love with this Bharati. Bharati is not yet Ubaya; she's only Bharati. She becomes Ubaya Bharati after her marriage, and all of that. So that there is a delegation that goes from Mandana Mishra's house in search of Bharati, who's shown to live probably in eastern India, somewhere close to the banks of the Son River. And they go there and they meet with their parents, and they make this proposal on behalf of Mandana Mishra. And then after the proposal is accepted, there's these four people go, and when they speak to Bharati's father, the father says a very important statement. He says, there are two things that I have to do. One, I need to speak with my wife. I can't take this decision independently on my own, and I'll speak to her. He does. And then he approaches his daughter and asks her, so here is this proposal. So what do you think? And she says, this is a proposal that I want to accept because this is a match that has been already made in the heavens, and I am in love with this person. That's what she says. And therefore, that's when the proposal is accepted. And then, the delegation comes back. Mandana Mishra, along with his parents, starts the long journey again to Bharati's place. And after the marriage is completed, Bharati's mother has a conversation. This appears even in the Digvijayam of Madhaviya Shankara Vijayam. And she has a fairly long conversation with Mandana Mishra. And she starts the conversation very, very, she starts the conversation by saying, there are certain things that I can speak to your mother, that is Mandana Mishra's mother. But there are certain things that I cannot speak to her of. But there are certain things that I can definitely speak to you and speak with you on. And she says, and that is a reflection of not only the society in those times, but also is so very relevant to current times, and in even the recent times. Let's say the 90s, 80s. She says, Bharati is someone who we've brought up. She's been very dear to us, and we've brought her up in a way that she really does not know much of the household chores and how to do all of those things. She may make a lot of mistakes, primarily because, one, she's very enthusiastic. Two, she really does not know the social mores and other things. Maybe we have not taught her enough. But what I can assure you is that I've told her that once she gets married, your parents are her parents. It is you. She has a great desire to continue her learning. It may not be possible, it may not be acceptable to your parents, but it is you who will have to speak with them and make it possible for her to continue her learning. And once she says all this and Mandana Mishra agrees to all of these things, she speaks to her daughter again, and she says, from now on, your husband's parents are your parents. The greatest, and she says, one of the things, the greatest help that you can render is that you look upon them not as Mandana's parents, but as your own parents, and treat them accordingly. She also says, all the guests who come to the house asking for Mandana Mishra when he's not there, when you speak to them in a way that creates absolutely no confusion in the minds of anyone, because it's quite natural for people to think and speak other things, but be very clear how you speak to them. 2, 3, she also says that whenever you speak, remember whatever you do, whatever you say, and however you conduct yourself, you represent both families. You represent Mandana's family, you represent our family also. And that is how, they together walk into the kind of sunset and get married. And it is much later, once Bharati herself becomes a great scholar, that she becomes Ubhaya Bharati, in the sense that she brought fame not only to her parents' house, but also to the house of Mandana Mishra. So that's why she's called Ubhaya Bharati, she who brought fame to both houses. So then we also have the Patanjali Charitham. I think I'll take, since we have about 14 minutes before I break for questions, I'll do a little bit of reading from one of those chapters. This is chapter 14 rather, sorry. And the chapter 14 is titled Ajabhakshita Bhashyam. And the section 1 of this chapter is also about Ajabhakshita Bhashyam. And I read, for a moment, even the Brahma Rakshasa was taken aback by the boy's fearless action of slitting his own thigh and dipping a stylus shaped out of a peepal twig into the oozing blood to make notes on the peepal leaves. Now, just to give a context, what happens is that, Gaudapada has been cursed. Gaudapada, who learns the Mahabhashyam at the Tillai Nataraja Sabha in Chidambaram, under, Patanjali, also suffers a curse, and therefore he's become a Brahma Rakshasa. I'll quickly give the context. So once he's become a Brahma Rakshasa, he spends time on a huge peepal tree on the banks of the Narmada, where he accosts travelers and and he asks a set of questions. Those who can, his curse, he will be freed of his curse only by that person who can answer all of his questions. And that person shall also become his disciple. But till that time, he lives the dharma of a Brahma Rakshasa. That is why, dharma is not black and white. It's all gray. So he feeds on people. He cannibalizes several people. He also does all of those things. And then it happens that, Govinda Bhagavadpada happens to pass by that way, a young boy. And he answers all the questions, and the Brahma Rakshasa says, finally, my moment has come and I will be freed of this curse. And that's when he says, I will start dictating the Mahabhashyam to you. You will make notes, but I will not give a single break. And apparently this Mahabhashyam that we have was written for 9 days and 9 nights continuously by this young boy who later would become the Govinda Bhagavadpada. So when as soon as they climb the tree, the Brahma Rakshasa starts to speak, and the boy realizes that he doesn't have anything to take notes on. And therefore, what he does is he pulls a knife out of his own from his waist, cuts open his thigh, shapes a twig into a kind of stylus, takes one of those peepal leaves and starts writing. That's what I'm referring to here. Blood, however, is thicker than water, and for that matter, thicker than ink, and being a biological product, congeals and clots. Most wounds, therefore, typically close in a short while. The boy was forced to make repeated incisions with his knife to draw fresh blood and use it as ink. Soon his whole lower body had become a checkerboard of multiple slits with oozing blood and buzzing flies. He hung on through sheer dint of courage, determination, and an unflinching faith in God and Guru. For 9 days and 9 nights, the Brahma Rakshasa spoke without break and explained the Mahabhashyam. The boy hung on, listening, digesting, reflecting, and writing without a wink of sleep or a morsel of food. Such was his burning desire for Vidya. He was without doubt the Satyakama of his times. Thus was the Vyakarana Bhashyam compiled, and what we have today as the Mahabhashyam is a product of this magnificent and heroic effort by the boy who was in his Purvashra Dharma called Chandragupta Sharma, who would later become the great Govinda Bhagavadpada, the famous ascetic and the guru of Shankara. As soon as the Mahabhashyam had been dictated, the Brahma Rakshasa's terrifying form started to dissolve like mist when the sun rises. As the fearsome form vanished, the Brahma Rakshasa once again gained a human form and stood as Govinda Bhagavadpada's guru, Gaudapada. He no longer wanted to lead the life of a Brahma Rakshasa, feeding on the flesh and souls of gullible travelers and seekers of Brahman. His mind was already flying far away in search of Jnana. He had the necessary Viveka and Vairagya. There was, however, still a need for a guru who would lead him along the path. He learned that the great Shukracharya was living in Badrik Ashrama, Badrinath, and decided that he would approach him. Shukracharya was an Atmajnani and a Jivan Mukta. Gaudapada decided that he would approach the great Shukracharya, fall at his feet, and implore him to accept him, i.e. Gaudapada, as his disciple. He blessed the boy and then immediately started his trek to Badrik Ashrama. There he met with Shukracharya, stayed with him for several years, learnt at his feet, and attained Brahmajnana. And I will read from another section. And many years later, the young boy whom he had taught Mahabhashyam and who had made notes using his own blood as ink would come to Badrik Ashrama and become the disciple of Gaudapada and be instrumental in starting the lineage of Shankaracharyas that remains unbroken till date. Such is the circle of life and history, is often crafted in the bends of life that are usually unpredictable and run along paths all their own. Gaudapadacharya also holds a very prominent and important position in the Acharya Parampara. It is with him that the lineage starts to acknowledge Acharyas in human form, ending the Puranic lineage of divine personages and rishis. Gaudapadacharya, then all of the other, what he's credited with, what he has written and all of that. And Shankara himself, speaks of Gaudapadacharya in one of on the commentary that he wrote on Gaudapadacharya's, Mandukya Upanishad Karika. And calls Gaudapadacharya as his Paramaguru and Mahapujya. That's what he speaks of, Shankara speaks of. And even today on the Konkan coast, not far from the village of Shiroda in Goa, you will find that the Gaudapadacharya Matam is present there. And Gauda Saraswats derived the lineage from here. So here was, kind of a national integration itself. Govinda Bhagavadpada was a, Kashmiri kind of Saraswat and the guru of Shankara. Shankara himself came from Dravida Desha. And Gaudapadacharya came from Gauda Desha, which is the Bengal region of those years. So you have the east, the north, and the south meeting. And I believe that Shankara benefited from this, kind of eclectic mix of influence from all three streams. And Gaudapadacharya was also a great devotee of Ambal, who is known as Brahma Vidya Swarupini and Maya Swarupini. And this also perhaps explains Shankara's devotion to Ambal and Lalita Tripura Sundari and his many works in praise of the Supreme Goddess. Now, Chandragupta Sharma, which is the Govinda Bhagavadpada's Purvashrama name, also wants to take up sannyas ashrama. He wants to take up sannyas ashrama, but he's not able to take sannyas ashrama. And he actually, Govinda Bhagavadpada actually ends up marrying 4 people. And I also build 4 women. And from all 4 varnas, he marries people from all 4 varnas. He marries first a Vaishya, a girl from a Vaishya family. This girl is an Ayurvedic physician, and she's the one, after the marathon 9 days and 9 nights, he walks all the way from the Narmada right up to Ujjain. And there he's so exhausted that he simply sleeps on a stone bench that is outside a merchant's house. And he slips into a kind of semi-consciousness, and he's given up for dead. But this girl starts to nurse him. And after several months of nursing, Govinda Bhagavadpada recovers. And during the course of the nursing, this girl, who's who's daughter of the merchant, and therefore belonging then to the Vaishya Varna, falls in love with him, and therefore insists that he must marry her. And the father is also very keen on, and despite Govinda Bhagavadpada trying to speak of how he wants to become a sannyasi and all of that, they go to the king's court, and Chandragupta Sharma ends up marrying the Vaishya. He also marries the daughter of the king, who is a Shrotriya, the daughter of the minister of the kingdom, who is a Brahmin, and finally he also takes a girl from the fourth Varna. And he has a son from each of these as well. And after the children have grown up and he's taught them the Mahabhashyam and he's established his school and they start teaching, that is when he goes in search of his Guru Gaudapada. He meets with him again at Badrikashrama, where Gaudapada is waiting for Govinda Bhagavadpada to come. Govinda Bhagavadpada spends several years with Gaudapada, learns everything, attains the Brahman himself. And then he is told by Gaudapada that there is a very, very critical role that you have to play. And that is where you will initiate the avatar of Mahadeva as your disciple, initiate him into sannyasa ashrama dharma. And therefore you will have to, and you will know when the time comes. After spending several years in the Himalayas, Govinda Bhagavadpada travels to Narmada, to the Omkareshwara, and there, it's said that he spends hundreds of years inside that little cave, and then Shankara approaches that cave and makes that wonderful introduction of himself, where he speaks of himself as that which is the spirit that lives beyond the body, and there is this whole introduction that he gives, and it says there, and the story says that this person, this Govinda Bhagavadpada, who lived inside that cave for several years, put only his feet out. Shankara held on to the feet, and then he was pulled into the cave and taken into the sannyasa ashrama dharma, both literally and figuratively speaking. So I think I will stop here. If there are any questions, I don't see any questions, but I also said that I would stop and I'm open to any discussion that I can have rather than continuing.
Thank you, Ramesh ji. Again, appreciate it. So a very modern way to look at all the events. I have never personally heard about the love story that you talked about. You said stories within stories. And I think that's what makes Adi Shankara's greatness very applicable. Those times, everything that we have from those times are applicable even today.
Sorry, I just wanted to
the lessons you said, Ubaya Bharati's mother said, are applicable even today, right?
Correct.
So that shows the strength of our Sanatana Dharma, our Samskriti, our Samskarams is so powerful that they are essentially timeless. So any other timeless wisdom that you can touch upon in the few minutes we have from those stories?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting since you mentioned that you did not know of the love story of these two, because that's why I said storytelling is so linear that even when we look at Ramayana, we say Sita was born there, Rama was born here. Even typically how we relate to it, but there are so many stories built into those stories, or the Mahabharata, for example. That's why I'm writing the story of the Vishnu Sahasranam, because there's a huge story. There are multiple stories around the Vishnu Sahasranam itself. And it could not have been, for example, that Bhishma reflected suddenly upon and came up with 1,000 names. There are multiple layers, multiple stories within that. Here also, it's interesting that the most popular Madhaviya Shankara Vijayam spends an entire chapter on Vandana Mishra and Bharati's love story. But not many people know of it because, we start one, maybe it's deliberately avoided. I don't know. It's a possibility that I have explored. Is it important? I think it is. Because conceptually seeing, here is Brahma and Saraswati, Veda and Vedavani are so closely related conceptually. And therefore, I also think at a conceptual level, you're also bringing that aspect of how Veda is Shabda Pramana and Vedavani are so closely related, that Saraswati and all of that. That story is also being borne out in the way this is done. And I just read that passage. Because I don't think I read the whole thing. For example, when the time came for Vishwarupa is Vandana Mishra's Purvashrama name, and Bharati to take leave and travel to Mahishamati. Mahishamati is where Vishwarupa, who's Vandana Mishra, lived. Bharati's mother spoke to Vishwarupa, asking him to take care of his wife, their daughter Bharati. And I quote, "Bharati is still a playful child. She does not really know all the household work and chores of a wife, and the responsibility of teaching her the ways of your house rests with your mother. We will not be able to speak to your mother like we are speaking to you. The responsibility of gently telling your mother all this rests with you, because speaking to you is akin to speaking to her. You are dear to her and she to you, and she will heed your words." And then they also speak of how, many years ago, and the same Brahmana also predicted that at some point in time, she would, become the umpire of one of the greatest debates on Dharma, and she would excel in the role even amid the great. They also say, the mother also says, be gentle and kind to her and do not speak harsh words. They say that, and she goes on to say, they say that before marriage, the parents are the gods to the daughter. And after marriage, the husband becomes both God and Guru. You are her Guru now. Guide her and lead a life of happiness, they say. And then the mother turns to the daughter. And the mother turns to the daughter and says, "Dear one, you are now entering a new phase of life. You have chosen as your partner the one you have desired. But from now, you must see him as your God and Guru and not somebody who you desired alone. Be one with him.
Involved in your thinking.
So she says, be one with him in his aspirations and actions in all respects. It is through this that a woman conquers the world, a feat otherwise difficult to achieve." Some may, object to it, but that's what they said. They also saw, they also talk about there is an order of precedence as laid down in the Shastras. Respect is at all times and learn it from the elders in his family, they're saying. Do not take your meal before your husband has finished his, and do not speak to strangers, facing them even in your husband's presence. When visitors come to the house while your husband is away, treat them with courtesy and respect, for some of them may be people of great repute, and even a single mistake can bring ruin to the entire family. Most importantly, from now on, learn to look upon your parents-in-law as your own parents and treat them with the same respect and love that you confer on us. If you're good to them, they will be good to you as well. If they become annoyed, all happiness in the marriage gets destroyed. This is the mother speaking, and I've hardly added a little bit of it to it. It's all taken from the Madhaviya Shankara Vijaya.
Fantastic. It reminds me of Kanva Maharshi's conversation he had with Shakuntala, at least in the stories that we heard, how he has given lot of principles of before he sends her off. Wonderful. There are a few questions. There was one question. Is there any mention of Adi Shankara's sort of is we all know Adi Shankara is considered avatar of Lord Shiva. Do you know of any references in the Mahabhagavatam? I know, for example, in Rudram there is a phrase that says Vyupta Kesaya Namaha, the one with no hair comes, and so on. That's what I have heard. Any references in Bhagavatam that Adi Shankara is come?
I don't think in the Bhagavatam, but the Markandeya Puranam definitely yes. Then in the last time we spoke of where all the references are. Definitely in the Shiva Rahasyam, the Shiva Rahasyam, the Rahasyam is actually given out here. And then in the in all of the, so these two specifically, there are, there is a lot of mentions. But again, like you mentioned in the Rudram, the Kanchi Paramacharya also talks of two other things. Shambhu and Shankara come together in the Rudram. And both are actually references to Shankara, is what he says. That Shambhu will come down as Shankara. And Shambhu is typically, a reference to the Dakshinamurti. So therefore, he says that Shambhu. So when the two come together in the Rudram, Paramacharya says that it's a clear indicator that you're talking of Shambhu being born as Shankara. And there is also this teaching where the clear comparison is made between him and Dakshinamurti as well. The same Dakshinamurti who earlier sat under the tree to teach, is the same person who is now walking on earth, is what the shloka says.
Wonderful, excellent references. Maybe next week, if you want to start your talk with some of the references that you talked about.
Actually, if they watch volume 1, they will see all of these.
Volume 1. Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, because volume 1, I have given all of the sources from where the material is taken, and there are upwards of over 21 sources that I mentioned there. And fantastic. If somebody wants the slide deck also, I can share it. Not an issue at all.
Thank you very much. There are a few other comments. We have a comment that says, Namaste, sir. The whole reference to the story of Govinda Bhagavadpada Acharya, she says it is very helpful because it, especially when teaching for students in Ayurveda. So thank you for that. There's also a question, I think this is more for Advaita Academy. Where can I see the complete list of books by Jagadguru Adi Shankara? I think Advaita Academy, I'm sure there is a place for all the list of books. Again, pick one, anything. I mean, it's impossible to read all the books and completely digest it. Pick one Bhashyam, the Dakshinamurti Stotram, or Bhashyam on Gita or Brahma Sutras. Pick one. There are at least 26 or 27, and along with many Bhashyams. And I think we'll make sure on Advaita Academy provides the complete list or a link. Yeah, so I think that there was another comment that said, thank you, sir, for really telling this amazing story of Shankara in the form of stories, because some people get attracted to the stotrams, to the bhashyams, but some people get attracted to the stories to create interest. Ultimately, to all the audience listening, our goal is to create curiosity, because Adi Shankara is the greatest unifier. So all of these should hopefully, you become interested to learn Sanskritam, you become interested to learn more about Jagadguru and also teach to your children. Any final comments before we wrap?
Final comments. Just to add to what you were just mentioning, you have the Kanakadara Stotram, right? That is one of the earliest compilations when he was still just he had gone for Bhiksha and he compiled the Kanakadara. That's a brilliant. One of the things that I looked is now, for example, he compares the fragrance. It comes to this to a particular flower that he says, and that flower is not available in southern India. So how now? The chapter is called "The Heavens Rain Gold," right? So because that's what happened, right? The Kanakadara Stotram. Now, how did he even come? So the question that I wanted to ask is, how did he come up with this particular reference? I mean, he's talking of the Tamala tree, which is Cinnamomum Tamala. It's grown particularly in the north and northeastern parts of India. He has still not traveled, but he's mentioning that, and is very, very sparsely cultivated in some parts of the Malabar region. But and he came from the Malabar region, so maybe he knows. But this plant is also known as Tej Patta or Malabar leaf, and is also referred to in the Greek literature as Malabatron. This plant, the reason I cite that he perhaps knew of it is that the Periplus, that is the Greek book, which is a sailor's log book, which speaks of the Erythraean Sea, also known in Latin as the and talks of the adventures and all of that of the Greeks, mentions this flower again, right? And what it says is that the Periplus notes that although this is largely grown in the Himalayan regions of India, its primary trade route was through the ancient port of Muziris on the Malabar coast in Kerala. And that is why this leaf, which is used in Indian cuisine to add aroma to rice dishes and gravy, is known as the Malabar leaf. Not because it's grown there, but the Muziris, or the port, was that port in Kerala was, it is also called Muchiripattanam. It was where it was being traded all the way from the north and northeast. It used to come to Kerala and get traded across the Muziris, and therefore Shankara must have known about it, because during his time it was a huge export that was happening to Greece and many of these countries, and therefore, and in that shloka he says, at a particular season, the entire tree is filled with this aromatic flowers, which give off a sticky, sweet smell. And the bees are absolutely dazed, and they go around those flowers. They can't get away from them. They're buzzing and moving around. And Shankara uses this as the uses the same analogy to say that Shri, who is Lakshmi, is buzzes around Vishnu because she cannot get away from him. She's so attractive, and he's so, and that little boy says, "Mother, I know that you're attracted to Vishnu like the bees buzzing around this Malabar, this flower, but I beseech you, why don't you take your eyes off him for a second and look at me?" That is what he was. So it's important to tell the story as well as the shloka. So the story will also have all of the shlokas. The chapter has the entire shloka also detailed out, but it also tells the story behind it, and makes some connects also in terms of where how he probably came up with it, kind of.
Yeah, I think you also in last few years we also touched upon Shankara's poetry. This is amazing poetic descriptions. Even in Saundara Lahari, there are so many analogies. That means he was a very astute observer. The mountains, the clouds, the rivers, the honeybees, the birds. He described how the Chakora Pakshi is. So there are so many such poetic elements that you cannot. I think one lifetime is not enough to know the full beauty of Jagadguru.
And here is somebody who became Mauna Muni at 28, which means the last 4 years is not right anything.
That's interesting. Okay, so do you have any history as to what he did during those 4 years?
They say that by the time of 29 he became a Mauna Muni, and we know that which means he became absolutely silent. I really don't know what is because in the story I have followed what G.V. Iyer did in his movie. How there is another Shankara who always travels with Shankara in that movie, brilliantly conceptualized by G.V. Iyer. It is actually, for a long time we don't realize who that other Shankara is, but it's actually death. His greatest companion was death, and it is that which drove him. We talk of Steve Jobs, right? I mean, he said, every day I get up, look at the mirror and say, I have been given one day, and today is the last day. But Shankara showed it so many years.
Oh, so can you share with our audience that movie? Is it Adi Shankaracharya?
It's a movie by directed and written by G.V. Iyer. It's a Sanskrit movie. You'll get it on YouTube also. I think it's free on YouTube.
Okay. I remember watching one Sanskrit movie. That must be the same thing. It's what a beautiful way, right? In fact, isn't death accompanying all of us? I mean, do we know when we are going and when the pasham will be removed and then we are set free? So what a great way to live life in a very productive, conscious way, that this life is a gift. And Adi Shankara, with what you just said, is an example. So Ramesh ji, thank you so much for your wonderful words of wisdom. And we'll look forward to hearing your part 3 and part 4 of the modern reckoning. So with that, we will be closing this session. The next session we will meet in exactly 11 hours. And the speaker is Sri Yogananda CS. He's going to be talking about creating a digital resource for all the Shastras. This is the fundamental need of the day, because as the world goes digital, we need to preserve all our Shastras. So Sanatana Sampatti project, which is to make sure that these Shastras not only remain immortal and they remain forever in our hearts and minds of all the students that are going to learn over the years, they also remain in the digital universe. So please join us again in about 11 hours. And please tell your friends about the Global Festival of Oneness, because our goal is to create massive awareness about the real unifier of India, the real Jagadguru, Adi Shankara. With that, Namaste, Hara Hara Shankara, Jai Jai Shankara.